Welcome back today, guys. Today we're going to be getting into the chapter 12 notes. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the growth of the South. Okay, so we've basically finished up Andrew Jackson's presidency there in the 1830s. Now we're going to kind of backtrack into chapter 12, where we're going to start looking at the differences between the North and the South. That give us basically a look at the differences between the North and the South that will end up leading to the Civil War. Okay, so today, chapter 12, we're going to be looking at the South here. Okay, so we're basically going to be looking at three standards today. We're going to be looking at 8.34, describe the development of the agrarian economy in the South, the locations of the cotton producing states, the significance of the cotton and the cotton gin, and the founding of Memphis as a center for cotton and the slave trade. We're also going to be looking at 8.35, analyze the characteristics of Southern society and its influence on the social and political conditions prior to the Civil War. In 8.36, we're going to identify the conditions of enslavement and explain how slaves adapted to and resisted bondage in their daily lives, including Nat Turner's revolt. Okay, so to break those down into some smaller sections here, looking at our objectives, quite a few here, so I'll go through them real quick. All right, we're going to describe the development of the agrarian economy in the South. Okay, agrarian agriculture, we're going to be looking at farming. We're going to describe the locations of the cotton producing states. We're going to describe the significance of cotton and the cotton gin. We're going to describe the founding of Memphis as the center for cotton and the slave trade. We're going to analyze the characteristics of Southern society, basically going to be looking at the different types of people living in the South at this time, and kind of what they do in Southern society. All right, we're also going to analyze the influence of Southern society on the social and political conditions prior to the Civil War. We're going to identify the conditions of enslavement. We're going to explain how slaves adapted to and resisted bondage in their daily lives. Some of these things we've already talked about. And then we're going to describe Nat Turner's revolt. Okay, so something new there that has to do with slave resistance. All right, so first things first, we're going to start off with the economic differences between the North and the South. Okay, so in the North, there's a lot of industry. All right, the Northern economy was more industrialized than the South. Many Northerners worked in factories making manufactured goods. And the North didn't rely on slave labor as much as the South. They had moved away from slave labor and people were working in factories manufacturing goods. All right, the South, on the other hand, was primarily based on farming. Okay, so most of the Southern economy was based on farming. Owners of plantations used slave labor. And one of the countries that helps out the South is Great Britain. So Great Britain built many new factories, which created more demand for Southern cotton. Okay, so Great Britain basically becomes the #1 customer for Southern cotton. All right. One thing that helps is the cotton gin. Okay, so Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin in 1794. And the machine was used to remove the seeds from cotton bolls faster. Okay, this little GIF here on the slide is kind of showing you how it does that. You'll see those cotton bolls go in, the seeds will come out, and then you have clean cotton. Okay, so with the help of the cotton gin, farmers were able to increase cotton production. So before the cotton gin, they had slaves picking those seeds out by hand. Obviously, with the machine, they were able to do that a lot faster. Okay, so they're able to increase their cotton production. This led to farms expanding their plantations and plantation owners buying more slaves to pick cotton. Because they could produce it so fast, they could produce more, they needed more people to work on those farms. All right, so they do end up buying more slaves and using more slaves. All right, so King Cotton in Memphis. In 1819, a group of wealthy men founded the city of Memphis, located on the Mississippi River. Okay, Memphis, of course, today in Southwest Tennessee. Memphis became a center for buying, selling, and shipping cotton. Okay, mainly because it's situated there on the Mississippi River. Okay, so people were able to travel to it very easily, and it became a center for cotton. West Tennessee became the richest cotton producing region of Tennessee. Okay, and you will see cotton production mainly in those southern United States, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and up into Tennessee. All right, with West Tennessee being the richest cotton producing region of Tennessee. West Tennessee also had the greatest concentration of slaves in the state. So there was more slave labor in West Tennessee than Middle and East Tennessee. Slave markets in Memphis prospered, and Memphis became the largest slave trading city in the Mid-South. Okay, so not only are they buying, selling, trading cotton, all right, but they're also buying and selling slaves in Memphis. Okay, it becomes very important for that. All right, now look into Southern society. All right, we're mainly going to look at 4 groups of people here. Okay, first we're going to start off with the planters. All right, planters owned 20 or more slaves and had about 1,000 acres of land. Okay, so that's what qualifies a planter. They had an overseer to manage slaves and day-to-day plantation routine. Now, an overseer is basically a slave that was trusted by the planter to basically run the farm on a day-to-day basis. All right. Planter's wife, though, did manage the household. Okay, so the planter was more worried about the farm. The wife was more worried about the house. You also have another group called yeoman farmers. They're our second group we're looking at. Yeoman farmers owned few slaves. Okay, so we're talking maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 at the most. They owned about 100 acres of land. Okay, so they're about 1/10 the size of planters. And mainly the family worked the farm. Okay, these would be your farming families where they would have, 5, 6, 7, 8 children who would all work on the farm to help take care of it. All right. The third group of Southern society are the poor whites. Okay, they did not own slaves. They usually didn't own any land. Okay, and if they were growing food, they were only growing food for themselves. Okay, subsistence farming, growing enough for them to eat and basically to live off of. Your fourth group in Southern society are slaves. Okay, so slaves were, of course, bought and sold by white owners. Their children were born into slavery. Okay, so if 2 slaves were married and had children, those children were enslaved automatically. And a majority of them were field workers. Okay, so they were out picking cotton, planting the fields. Okay, a select few would be working in the house. Okay, actually doing, dishes, chores within the house, and maybe even taking care of the planter's children. Okay. So slavery divides the nation. We start to see a divide here in the early 1800s. Okay. In the North, abolitionists believe slavery should be abolished. Okay, so you'll see that word a lot here. Abolitionists are people who want to get rid of slavery. The North wanted to stop the spread of slavery to the West. Okay, they were kind of fine with it being in the South as long as it was contained there. Okay, they didn't want slavery to spread into the new Western states that would be coming about. The North also recognized that slavery was immoral and inhumane. Okay, so they knew it wasn't right. They knew they weren't doing the right things with slaves. Now, the South, on the other hand, okay, so we're going to, of course, going to have 2 sides to this coin. The South fought to maintain slavery, and they believed that the North had no right to interfere. Okay, they really didn't know what Southern society was, so they shouldn't, get their nose in somebody else's business. The South, of course, opposite of the North, wanted slavery to extend into the West. They wanted to spread slavery. Okay, they didn't want it to go away. Slavery for the South was very profitable. All right, they wanted to be able to use slaves and or sell them to farmers in the West. Okay, so that is a big divide there with between the North and the South on slavery. Okay, so maintaining slavery. The South wanted to maintain their hold on slavery, of course. So they had state and local governments pass laws to control slaves, and these become known as slave codes. Now, here's what slave codes basically do. All right, they were used to prevent slave rebellions and escape. We'll talk about a famous slave rebellion here in a second. They targeted enslaved people, but also affected free African Americans. Okay, so not only is it affecting slaves, but also free African Americans. And they set penalties for slave owners who didn't enforce the codes. Okay, so again, a way to maintain some order, kind of control slaves. That's why slave codes were passed. Okay, now, of course, we've already kind of talked a little bit about slave resistance, but we're going to hit on it again real quick. Many slaves resisted their bondage in different ways. Okay, one way you would break machinery or destroy crops. Okay, now again, you wouldn't go and break every single tool or machine that you had in one day. You would do it over time. Okay, but that's how they would resist. They would work slowly. Okay, or pretend not to know how to do things. Would be another way that they would resist their bondage. Okay. Some would go into more extreme sides and actually poison their owners. So their owners would die. They would be able to run away. And speaking of running away, some would run away to freedom in the North, usually with help from people who oppose slavery, people like Harriet Tubman, that we'll talk about later on with the Underground Railroad. Okay, so those are some of the ways that slaves resist bondage. All right. Now, last here, Nat Turner's rebellion. Now, Nat Turner led a revolt against slavery in Virginia. Nat Turner himself was a slave. Okay, so he rose up and started a rebellion. It was very effective, with hundreds of slaves taking part in the uprising. The revolt killed about 60 white people. Okay, so you had slaves rising up and killing their owners, which totaled about 60 people. All right. In the end, the revolt failed, though, and Turner and more than 100 African Americans were killed for their involvement. Okay, so there really wasn't, a slap on the wrist and nothing like that. They killed these people that were in the revolt. Okay, to put it down. So as a result, many white people in the South feared that more slaves would revolt, so they passed even stricter slave codes. Okay, so because of this revolt, okay, Southerners become more scared of slaves and try to pass those stricter slave laws to kind of control that. Okay, all right. That's all I have for today. Okay, that is chapter 12, looking at chapter 12 and basically the growth of the South and how that differs from the North. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know, but we will see y'all next time.